Hi everyone, my name's Simon. Welcome to our rendering teardown section. Today we'll be dealing with this exterior rendering of a nice house. Let's dive into how to make it a little bit better. As you can see on the overall image, the thing is the image is quite balanced. Everything's working quite well. In terms of atmosphere as well, we're dealing with this nice dusky image, so with the artificial lighting is quite good as well. Also, although we'll see, we can make some stuff regarding it. One thing though that I'd like to talk about first is going to be composition. So in terms of composition here, you can see we might it's quite subjective, but still I think it's a little bit too, we don't have enough sky in here, so I would suggest having it a little bit higher, something like that, and you just increase the sky here, because that way you have something that sort of breathes a little bit more. It's kind of subtle, it's just a couple of centimeters here, but still it's something I think that changes the way you perceive the projects. One thing though that I think here is a little bit problematic is going to be the distortion, because it's not that obvious on the rest of the the project itself, although this kind of thing here might be you sort of notice it, but still. But the thing is, when you're looking at this Range Rover here, it looks really, although it's still a quite long car or a truck, whatever, it's still you can notice the distortion and feel like this is something like a 25mm lens or something like that. It's a little bit too much. So this is something when you're dealing with frontal views, it's just be careful with that and try to stay as close as possible to human eye lens, if I may say. So that would be something say around 35mm is something that quite works. In terms of details, we have what is really working well with this image is that the details of the inside of the image are the inside of the building, are quite well done. You can understand sort of how the actual house works. This is the living room, this is double height, or I may say you have a stair coming up here, and maybe this might be some sort of a bedroom or whatever, but still you get a sense of how it's used, which is a good thing. I'm a little bit unsure about the artificial lighting. There's a lot of light, but it might not be the problem, but still the couple of things, these sort of bloom effect here are a little bit overdone. Not necessarily overdone, but they're overdone because they're used everywhere, which is a little bit kind of problematic, because this kind of effect only happen they usually happen when you're with your point of focus, or when you're out of focus, I'd say, when the light comes in your lens from a too wide angle, too acute angle, sorry. So basically this cannot really happen everywhere in the image, so that's something you want to be a little bit careful with. And also this sort of makes the image a little bit heavier in terms of perception. So you might want to, I don't know, maybe just lighten the whole thing, or at least decrease the effect. Another thing regarding detail, although in terms of modeling, it's quite good, these trees, and quite the foreground sort of pebbles here, here are quite good. Although there's one thing, it's these, all the rendering here are basically out of scale. As you can see here, we have this sort of thing here should be maybe not even, maybe 5 times smaller or something like that. So it's something much more, from this point of view, like this distance, sorry, this should looks like some sort of a noise, like just like that. So that's not what we have, which is a kind of a problem. Another thing we can have a look at, and I think is problematic here, is although like we're dealing with some sort of HDRI image, I think the problem is it's working well here because, well, we don't see the horizon. But always pay attention when you're doing well, not even frontal views, but whenever you're dealing with reflection, and always have something on the backside of your image, because as you can see here, this is the horizon of your HDRI image, and we can see it all the way across the building. And the problem with that is that, first, this is, well, not realistic, but the second thing is that once you don't have the HDRI, it means it's going to reflect a black area on the whole thing, which is really inconvenient. So always either like just take the vegetation you have and scatter it behind the camera, or maybe just like have some photographs of facades you can put, or just like mirror your building and do something anyway, just like try to put something that will create some sort of a horizon. Whoops, because otherwise it's some sort of details that will kind of decrease the realism of your reflection. A couple of things we can have a look at there would be, there you go, would be, I think first things first would be, there's a kind of lack, like when you're in this sort of setup in terms of lighting, it's always going to be much more contrast. There's going to be much more contrast than what we can see here. So it would sort of be like this. As you can see, it's quite different, and this way it sort of decreases the like it emphasizes the artificial lighting, but at the same time it decreases the sort of a bloom effect we were dealing with that was sort of unappealing in the end. Second thing here is more in terms of well, I'm going to talk about saturation first. In terms of saturation, we have something that is quite good, because when you're dealing with artificial lighting, the artificial light is always going to be more saturated than your natural sky, which is the case here. Although, if I turn off my... that is weird. Oh, yeah, no, that's alright. Although, here, something's kind of weird. As you can see, this setting sun here is creating some weird, like the saturation is not really, like, it cannot be like that. You cannot have like half of it completely desaturated and the other half saturated. So this looks like something went wrong with the Photoshop work here. So that's something you need to have a look at, which would basically mean, well, basically I would recommend changing the sun and having something like a little bit later in the days, because when you look at the overall colors, you can see that nothing stands out, like except for the inside light, but still there's some. I would recommend having something a little bit more contrasty in the background for the sky. Second thing as well is that this sort of vegetation, when you're dealing with the dusk lighting, is gonna change. You cannot get this sort of green light. It's always gonna be a little bit more bluish. What am I doing? Something like that, maybe. So basically always pay attention to how your colors are supposed to switch when you're whoops. when you're changing the overall lighting in the image. I think this is a little bit too harsh there, although might be okay. Anyway, so another thing regarding lighting as well that can be fun is to always try to get subtle changes in your artificial lighting, because you're never going to use, well, you're not never going to use, but still, like, you tend to have different lighting depending on the areas you're dealing with. So basically, say in a kitchen, you're going to have like a more bluish or yellow artificial lighting, whereas in a more lounge area, you're going to have something like less crude and more subtle, like orange or something like that. Or so this is something you can sort of change and have like tiny, like really subtle changes in the way the artificial lighting evolves throughout the different spaces. It can be the same happening with your exterior lighting. So yeah, just a matter of like the temperature. I think that's not much else to say. So as you can see, it's just like not much of a change, but it's still interesting, and there are like a couple of stuff I couldn't really do, but I think this, yeah, it's just a matter of changing the sky, having a bit of detail change in the horizon, and that'll be it. I think that'll be it. Hopefully you've learned some interesting stuff and you got some new ideas on what to keep an eye on for your next rendering, and hopefully I'll see you on the next video. Thank you guys. Bye. Tonight,